Greetings and welcome to Flanagan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanagan. And this week, Laura Deehan is my guest. She is the State Director of Environment California, an organization that is tackling global warming, protecting oceans, fighting for clean air, clean water, open spaces, and a livable planet. That's a big job. She's been the State Director since 2021. She's been part of the Public Interest Network since 2001. Laura, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ted. So excited to be here today.
Let's start with a really broad question. What is the state of the environment in California today?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. So on the one hand, California is one of the most incredible, special, beautiful places to live on the planet. I'm originally from Scotland, and when I moved out to California, I was just blown away by how beautiful it was. And in part because we have the best weather in the world, I think. There's an incredible Mediterranean climate. And so it's pretty awesome to get to live here, enjoying our beaches, our incredible coastline, the mountains, the forests, the desert. There's so many amazing places. But then when it comes to the state of the environment, I think we've got some really big challenges. California's got some of the worst air quality in the entire country. Still, right? It's really hard to breathe the air in places like Los Angeles or even San Diego, the Central Valley, the Bay Area, Sacramento, many days of the year. It's unsafe. And we have problems with water pollution. We still have really big threats when it comes to the impacts of global warming, climate change, where we're seeing, the drought, the wildfires, the heat waves. And so there's a lot of things to be concerned about. And then on the other hand, California has been the leader when it comes to really working to solve those problems. And we've got a public that is concerned and engaged and aware, especially, when it comes to tackling environmental problems, clean air and clean water. There's a lot of support for solutions like investing in clean energy that we see. And so I think that gives us as a unique opportunity in our state to really be at the vanguard of solving these problems and helping to tackle them in a big way for the rest of the country as a model and for hopefully the rest of the world as well.
Well, very well put, and I can see why you're the director. You're highly articulate. I love your Scottish accent, of course. There's obviously we're in the midst of a very contested gubernatorial race in California. And one of the things that I've heard brought up several times is that California is no longer affordable, especially for younger people. The California dream is no longer attainable or is much harder to attain. And of course, environmental controls are being pinpointed as one of the reasons for this. What is your response to that?
Well, we're a bit more focused on overall quality of life concerns for the people who live in our state. And so when you look at the things that are kind of fundamental to being alive on our planet today, every day we have to breathe air, we have to drink water, we have to be in the world, in our surroundings. And we're really worried that those quality of life issues that are so fundamental to us and to future generations are not getting enough of the attention that they deserve from lawmakers and, from, I think that they're not being elevated in the media enough either, honestly. So we're worried about that. We're working to elevate those issues. I think that most of the people I talk to really want to make sure that as the state is working to address, a time of transformation and disruption when it comes to economies and, our systems, that they're not, that quality of life issues are not being sacrificed, that we're making sure that our health and our future is prioritized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you would agree that some of the environmental controls that we put, like on gasoline refining, for example, is a costly exercise or results in higher cost fuel, but that's worth it, right? That we need to pay a premium to keep our airs clean, to keep our children healthy, et cetera.
Well, it's interesting when you actually analyze why the gasoline costs more in California. It turns out the cost of doing the pollution reduction measures is actually a tiny fraction of the increased price at the pump. And so, making sure that we don't have these highly toxic fumes emitted, when,
Yeah.
especially in hot summer months when the pollution's really, really high, there's a lot of smog in the air already. It's critical that we're not creating more and more smog, right, from
Yeah.
getting from A to B. We know that California has been a big car-centric economy, car-centric kind of culture. And so we want to make sure that as we're moving people around the state, that we're not polluting the air, making it harder for people to breathe and making people sick. So yeah, absolutely, that is worth it. That is worth it to me. I think that's worth it to most people in California. And then it's unfortunate that the oil companies have manipulated the marketplace to the degree that they have. They've taken advantage of the fact that California is a kind of a closed market when it comes to gasoline, it's almost like a bit of a monopoly system, where there's less competition, and they've been able to hike up the prices as a result of that. But we're excited that there's been reductions in air pollution, thankfully, as a result of the growing adoption of clean cars and also alternatives to driving, right? There's more people riding their bicycles today than there used to be, or walking from A to B. I remember coming from Scotland and being stunned by how hard it was to get to the local shops, to go to the groceries, to get groceries, because there wasn't the sidewalks or the infrastructure. And it's a lot different today. You can see safe bike lanes in a lot of communities that are going to help us with that quality of life, air being safe to breathe. So
I remember being here in the 80s and just, oh my God, it was so polluted. And now, thankfully, for all the actions that your organization and other environmental groups have taken over the years, the skies are so much cleaner. Let's talk about oceans. You just were in Sacramento, and Environment California is very involved with campaigns and raising awareness, and then influencing our legislators in Sacramento. We just had on April 28th, California's 21st Ocean Day. And it's the 50th anniversary of the Coastal Act, which maybe you can talk a little bit about. And what was that act? And then what was the focus of this month's lobbying in Sacramento?
Thank you. Yes, it was such a fun day in Sacramento. This is the 21st time we've brought the ocean to Sacramento by holding California Ocean Day at the Capitol. And we had about 300 ocean advocates, ocean activists, from surfers to divers to community members that just really care about our coast, all come up to Sacramento to lobby. And there was a big celebration to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the California Coastal Act, as you say, and the Coastal Conservancy. And so that was really important. That's the law that really is the reason that California's coast is still so incredible today. There were proposals before the Coastal Act was put in place, when it was passed into law by voters in 1976. It was the thing that allowed us to stop crazy development ideas that most people would have hated, from, there was proposals to have like nuclear plants like every 5 minutes up and down the California coast, literally. There were proposals to do way more oil and gas drilling up and down California's coast. There were discussions about, doing more development of hotels and, things like, you could just imagine if California was like the Miami, or these really highly developed coastal cities, and we don't have that. We've got beaches that have public access, where we have a right to be able to go and enjoy our beaches, all of us, and there's not privatized hotel complexes that own the beach or own the coast, the way you see in other places. And so that's thanks to the Coastal Act. So there was a lot to celebrate. There's been attacks on that law, since voters made it happen. It was really a Prop 20 was the law that was passed, the ballot measure that was passed, and it was this model of like citizen-led action. And there's a great documentary that just came out about the history of the California Coastal Act getting passed. Super, super inspiring story. So we showed that film at Ocean Day to remind lawmakers and decision makers why this law is so important. And then we worked to defend that law. And then we were also standing up against new proposals to expand offshore oil drilling. as well as supporting proposals to expand and strengthen California's incredible network of marine protected areas, which are like the state parks in the ocean where destructive activities are off limits and people can go and enjoy, but you can't like take stuff out of marine protected areas, just like our parks system on land. And so we're supporting, for the first time since its creation, an opportunity to strengthen and expand those marine protected areas up and down our coast.
I mean, I have so many questions to ask you. First of all, let me just dive into a little bit into the structure of Environment California, because I was hesitant to use the word lobby when you're in Sacramento, but I believe as a 501c4, you are a tax exempt organization. You are able to lobby and to take positions at the legislature, right? And then you have a sister organization. Okay, I can't remember the name of it. Environment California, something or other.
Research Policy Center.
Research and
Yeah.
Policy Center. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's your 501c3, and so that you
Yes.
have the structure is to have both of these entities working together, right?
That's right, exactly. So I'm the state director for both corporations, Environment California, which is a 501c4. So that means that we can lobby, in support or against legislation in Sacramento as much as we want. There's no limits on our lobbying work, really. We just have to report it. And then we also have a sister organization, the Research and Policy Center, which is that houses our research work, our report writing, our education work. And so we can do a lot of great outreach, and we organize like webinars, and we've got research reports that we'll release frequently. And so that allows us to do both of that work.
Got it. Okay. So now these MPAs, these marine protected areas, we have some of them. How many do we have? I know I used to live in Laguna Beach. I believe we have one right off of the coast in Laguna. But are there dozens of these areas, or what's the?
So actually, there have been marine protected areas for many years in California of different sorts. But over a decade ago, there was a big initiative to create the first ever global network of marine protected areas, which were established off the California coast. And so that was was the Marine Life Protection Act that was passed in 1999. And then the Marine Protected Area Network was created really just over a decade ago, was finalized. So like 2012. And there's now 124 of these marine protected areas off the coast, and they're kind of created to work together. So it's not just the impact of any one little marine protected area that you're thinking about, but we're thinking about how do you help encourage the ecosystem overall for the whole California coast to be healthy by having these interconnected networks. So they're supposed to be fairly regularly existing up and down the coast, like no more than 60 miles apart is the goal, and things like that, of a size, reasonable size. And it was an awesome example of fishing groups along with environmental groups, scientists, kind of coming together to hammer out how do we create a network. And so every 10 years, they're supposed to do a review of how it's working. The review went really well. The state found that our Marine Protected Area Network is really providing massive benefits to California's coast and to all of us, to make a healthier ocean, more vibrant marine life. There's more fish, bigger fish, thanks to our Marine Protected Area Network. And in fact, we just got international recognition, the first ever network to get recognized by the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, who said we made it on their green list of being a top network. So it's really working. But there's also signs that we need to do more to protect our ocean, given all the threats facing ocean life today. We're seeing massive changes. We've got like a loss of about 90% of the large fish, like shark and tuna globally. We've seen just overfishing is a huge problem for ocean health around the world. But we've also seen, impacts from marine heat waves and, as a result of global warming. There's been increased stress on marine life, right, as a result of these kind of extreme weather events. And so just in the last decade, we lost about almost 90% of California's kelp forest habitat, which was, really important for coastal health. Yeah. And so That was kind of a cascading ecosystem impacts following the last big marine heat wave in
Yeah.
2014 to 2016. And so one of the things that we found, though, is that marine protected areas are a powerful tool to help the ocean protect marine life, allow nature to recover and
Yeah.
be stronger and more vibrant. And so we want to see more and stronger, better, more effective marine protected areas for the next 10 years, so we can weather the storms to come and ensure that we continue to have the oxygen benefits. I think like half of every other breath you take is thanks to the
Yeah.
ocean
Yeah.
and the oxygen it produces, where it's this huge carbon sink. In kelp forests in particular, they absorb like 20 times more carbon than terrestrial forests. So it's really important that we protect the last healthy kelp forest that we have in the ocean to allow that kelp forest resource to
Yeah.
continue to be resilient in the future.
Well, then it's a very basic question on these marine protected areas. How are they protected? I thought I remembered that the one off of Laguna Beach, that scuba divers could go there, but they could not take lobster out. Is that sort of look but don't touch, or look but don't take, or is that
That's right.
essentially?
Reserves are literally no-take zones, so you can't take anything out. Just like when you go to the national park, you're not
Yeah.
allowed to hunt
Yeah.
or pick flowers even. It's similar to that. You aren't allowed to take out the fish or the kelp. Like, you can't cut stuff up and take it out. You can go and explore if you like to go into the ocean, which most people don't actually go in that far, but if you're a diver or a kayaker or swim, you can totally go do that in marine protected areas. You can surf, you can enjoy it as much as you like, but you just can't take stuff out of the reserves. We also have some of the marine protected areas allow limited take. So they might say it's okay if you're a recreational fisher, you can do hook and line fishing from shore in a marine protected area, but maybe more of the commercial, industrial kind of level fishing isn't permitted.
Yep. All right, let's go back to Sacramento. A couple weeks ago or last week, you just mentioned offshore oil, and I was under the impression, probably most of our listeners are, that our offshore oil protection is basically being retired now in California, but that apparently is not the case.
That's a great question. So there was, we do have currently offshore oil drilling, right, happening off the coast of Santa Barbara, etc., Orange County as well. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether we should stop that or reduce, and retire those oil rigs, because
Yeah.
they're incredibly risky and polluting and dangerous for ocean life, as we've seen from the recent oil spills, right, off the
Sure.
coast of Huntington Beach a couple of years ago, the Refugio spill in Santa Barbara in 2017, devastating impacts to nature and to all of us. And so that's been an active discussion. Unfortunately, in the last few months, there was a proposal from the Trump administration to expand offshore oil drilling, not just in the places where we currently have leases, but to have new lease sales up and down the California coast. And that's a wildly unpopular idea in the state of California. Most people disagree with that. They really do not want to see any new oil drilling, certainly off the California coast. And so there's been pretty strong opposition from state leaders, both Democrats and Republicans in California. We actually had the local Republican Assembly Member Laurie Davies, who joined us for the lunch, along with Secretary Wade Crowfoot, who's the head of our agency for nature, the Natural Resources Agency. And they spoke about why Californians are united against letting any new oil drilling actually happen. So we'll see what happens. There's a law that is moving in the legislature right now that would make it really, really difficult for anybody who bought those leases, who bid on those leases, to actually get oil rigs connected to land, right? Get any pipelines built, because it would prohibit transporting the oil to the state, so that state, in that waters are controlled by the state, right? Up to the 3 nautical mile line. And so there's a lot that California can do to make it really difficult for any investments to actually move forward. So
And here's a naive,
yeah.
and naive question. I mean, do we have a lot of oil offshore here? I mean, are we sitting on a mini Saudi Arabia, or I don't think so.
That's actually, I don't know the answer to that. How many oil resources are there? The thing I have heard is that the oil that's being extracted off California's coast isn't really the quality to be used in our
Mm,
state. It's mostly getting exported and used
mm.
for other purposes. Anyways, it's not even. Anyway, it's so risky, so dangerous. You cannot spill. I mean, you cannot drill without spilling, is what we keep seeing
Yeah.
time and again. And so that's why I think most Californians, disagree with that proposal, and we're hoping it won't actually move forward at all.
Well, I'm working my way towards this new report that you're about to release on energy in California. But let's talk about offshore wind. I know your organization has been very strong advocating for 100% renewable use of 100% renewables in the state. What have you done with the offshore wind, and what's the state of that work?
Yeah, offshore wind is this tremendous potential clean energy solution for California. Whenever the sun sets, that's when we've been firing up the gas plants over the years. Although now we're using more solar storage, when the sun sets, which is a very
Yeah.
exciting success story. But we've always known that the winds pick up, and especially offshore, we're talking 25 miles off of the coast, there's really powerful winds. There's this map that the NREL put out that shows where is the highest wind potential in the whole country, and the especially Northern California coast is
Yeah.
one of the windiest places, the Saudi Arabia, for wind.
Mm.
And so we were excited about that potential. We put out a report a few years ago called Offshore Wind for America that kind of documents what's the potential. We found we could meet all of our energy needs actually for the state of California with offshore wind alone if we wanted to. It's that rich in wind power. And so then Environment California teamed up with some other organizations. We formed a coalition called Offshore Wind Now, which has been working for several years to advocate for tapping into this clean energy solution and doing it obviously in an environmentally responsible way, right? Making sure we're doing smart siting and we're putting in place the top environmental protections as we go big on offshore wind. And we worked to pass a law, AB 525, a few years ago, which directed the state of California to set a goal for offshore wind and then
Mm.
make a plan to get there, work with all the different agencies involved to kind of clear the path. And so that was really exciting. We got that law passed. And then California set an ambitious goal. At the time, it was 25 gigawatts by 2045, and ideally, 2 to 5 gigawatts by 2030, a kind of range there. That was really thrilling. We then supported both the lease sales, there was 5 companies that bid. And then we've also supported investments in the port upgrades we need and the other infrastructure upgrades to make sure we're ready to catch those winds and use them to power our lives, especially when the sun sets.
It's how great, how great. And I believe that these will be floating wind turbines, which is a sort of a new technology that's been developed over the past decade for deep water, right? And we don't have a continental shelf here like they do on the East Coast. So we're having to have these floating wind turbines. And who's opposing offshore wind development? Is it fishermen and shipping lines, or is that essentially who is saying no, we don't want this? I mean, at 25 miles offshore, I don't think we'll be able to see them.
You
Uh,
won't see them. Yeah, we don't have the same problems that you do in some places where people are worried about the view.
yeah.
But in California, the biggest opponents have actually been powered by the fossil fuel interests, is what
Mm.
we've seen. And that's true on the East Coast as well, where there's been active efforts to undermine support in the communities, even though these are the communities that would stand to benefit a lot, right, from this new clean energy solution in their right at home. So we're
Mm.
worried though, because unfortunately, President Trump is not a big fan of offshore wind. Actually, I think it was a project in Scotland, my home country, that kind of
Yeah,
turned him off the solution. And I think he has a golf course that has,
I heard that. Right.
yeah, he had a view of he was really upset about the view being spoiled by having
Yes.
offshore wind, and it kind of became his least favorite energy solution. And so, unfortunately, he's been putting a lot of pressure on the offshore wind companies to back off of their plans to do offshore wind in a big way in California. And just last week, one of the companies, Golden State, Wind took the buyout option that he'd
Yeah.
offered. And so that was a pretty sad setback for us because what they did was it means that taxpayers have bought the lease back. So that's money that, I don't think there was much public engagement or involvement in that decision. But then in addition, they've promised not to do offshore wind development, but instead to invest the same amount of money in oil and gas development, which is obviously way more polluting for our air and our water and our future. And so we were really sad about that, but we're hopeful because since then, just in the last week, we've seen the Energy Commission subpoena the company to ask for all the relevant documents that have, correspondence that's happened around this decision. And so we're going to see what happens, but we're really hoping that the other offshore wind leaseholders in California, there's 4 other companies, that they don't take the buyout and instead see it as in the interest of their company interests, as well as all of us, to continue to move forward with offshore wind.
I was horrified to hear. I think the Trump administration is spending, is it $1 billion or $2 billion on buying out or influencing these wind companies not to go forward with their plans. I didn't realize that one of those was in California. That's shocking to me to hear that. But how interesting. If it's hard to predict, but when do you think we might see the first offshore wind coming ashore in California?
Well, that's a really good question.
5 years out, or do we know?
Yeah, it's so difficult to predict right now because of all of these political uncertainties. You do need federal permits to be able to do it. It's not like just because they have the leases, now it's all clear. And so until we have a more offshore wind friendly administration, it will be challenging to get all the federal permits. And I think in the meantime, obviously we need the leaseholders to hold fast and continue to show, to see the support is really strong from Californians. We've seen poll after poll that it's like 80% plus of Californians want to see offshore wind happen. And it's everywhere from Southern California up to Northern California. There's opportunity, for us to see benefits. I know that Long Beach Port is excited to be to have this project called Pier Wind, where they would see some of the manufacturing happen there locally. And so anyway, there's a lot of enthusiasm about it. And we're hoping that momentum won't be slowed too much. The original goal was to see some offshore wind turbines, by 2030, and we're hoping we can still make that happen.
Yeah, it pairs so nicely with all the solar that we've got. Let's talk about this report that I think you said is coming out next week on the state of renewables in California. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a dashboard. We update it every year, and it's a kind of fun, interactive dashboard where you can see how is California doing at implementing clean energy solutions, but not only California, actually, it's for the whole country. So you can compare each state to one another, as well as, look at the overall trends for the whole United States on renewable energy adoptions.
How great. And that's coming out next week, and that'll be accessible on your website, or how will people get a hold of that?
That's right. If you go to environmentcalifornia.org/center, which is the Research and Policy Center's website, that's where you'll be able to see that interactive dashboard, and you can see progress over the last decade. So we update it every year with just the latest decade. And it will be everything from solar to wind to storage to energy efficiency to EVs and EV chargers are the kind of key technologies we look at. And usually California's at the cutting edge. We're like leading the charge on a lot of this, but we're definitely not alone. It's funny, the last couple of years, Texas has beat us on overall renewable adoption, which is we're always working to make sure we're in the leaders. But Texas has been really impressive when it comes to deployment of renewables. Which is a kind of it's a story that you don't always hear about, like how Texas has been so successful in that. And we're hoping
it's a twist, isn't it? That's the oil and gas state. So the fact that they're topping California for solar and wind it makes you scratch your head. But on the other hand, 3 cheers. That just shows that the people in Texas and the Texas government sees the value of these renewable resources. So
They do. Although we are still the leaders on solar. I'll give you that.
Oh, are we? Okay, good.
We are winning there, and we're doing a lot on battery storage and EVs and EV chargers. We're really, really continuing to lead the pack. but we've got more work to do if we want to continue to be the leaders to kind of keep that momentum.
Final couple questions. I know that Environment California is sort of the umbrella organization for about 30 public interest groups. And then on the other direction, there's Environment America, which is sort of the umbrella organization for all these statewide agencies or organizations. And as I think about all the issues that you're working with, forestry issues, bees, wildlife crossings, banning single-use plastics, how on earth do you decide what to focus on?
Oh, great question. One thing I'll just clarify. So Environment California and Environment California Research and Policy Center, we're our own state organization. We're definitely part of this federation of state environment groups, which is Environment America. But then the whole thing is part of this broader kind of umbrella group that we think of as the Public Interest Network. And so the Public Interest Network houses about 40 different organizations, everything from PIRG, the Public Interest Research Group, to the National Environmental Law Center, where we sue polluters, to the Green Century Fund, which is like an investment organization which is fossil-free investments. And so they're a mutual fund. So anyway, so there's lots of different brands under it. Environment America and the state environment groups are just one of the brands. But yeah, how do we set the priorities? Honestly, it's a big challenge. I often think of my job as like there are so many environmental problems and solutions, things that we could be doing right now to really help protect the environment. And so we really think about where can we make a difference? What is winnable? What can we get accomplished? Where's the public at? What are people concerned about? Where can we organize and engage and activate that political support? Decision makers care when the public's engaged and paying attention. And so we look at that. And I think those are some of the big factors, especially lately. We've been trying to figure out what can we get everybody to agree on. We want to work on issues where we've got 90% of the public with us. And it's interesting that in a kind of polarized political moment, there are a lot of things people do agree on, right? We do agree we should have clean air. We all have to drink the water. We all want to live in a place that's beautiful and where we have a livable future for our kids. And those are things that I think most people agree on. And so we're working to, in particular, work on issues that have that strong 80-90%, support, as well as where we have a chance to activate and engage kind of more unusual bedfellows, organizations that aren't typically thought of as, typical environmental groups. So we're doing a lot of that work.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. And thanks so much for being on the podcast this morning. It's been a real pleasure hearing about your work and meeting you. So, and carry on. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been so fun.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanagan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.